Hey friends, my name's Aaron Ciotti. Everybody calls me Ciotti. Welcome to Midpoint Monday. The flooding seems to have, well, there is no more flooding, which is awesome. We've been big old rainstorm today. Sorry, I was just moving stuff around. This is obnoxious. I can't handle this being so close to me. So I was moving stuff out of the way as quick as I possibly could, and I didn't move it quite fast enough for the end of that song. So, yeah, there's that. But yeah, today we are going to talk about Throttle Expo and Throttle Midpoint. And they are just magical when you get them set right. And they're really important for these high KV tiny whoops to make them a lot easier to fly and a lot more realistic to rail around inside. Shout out to Riot9 for the idea for this episode. On my Discord, I've got a. I'm not gonna put this all the way back. I'm just gonna put it somewhere, kind of, sort of. Oh god. Yeah, Riot9. So on my Discord, I've got a text channel called Name the Stream. And that is where you guys can put your ideas for live streams that you would like to see. Whew! And, Jesus, shelves are heavy. And that's all I have to say about that. I have to move one more shelf. Hold on. Yeah, so you can go in there if you've got a cool alliteration-ish name for a live stream. You can drop it on in there, right? Like, I do the whole first letter thing. Midpoint Monday, Micro Monday. You know what I mean? See what I'm up to there? And then, yeah, maybe I'll do that live stream. Like I am here today. Yeah, there we go. Oh my God. Oh wow. Oh, it's back to normal. Not totally normal, but oh boy, is that way better. I can breathe. Oh, yo. Wow. I didn't realize how claustrophobic it was with all this stuff pulled out from the wall. If you haven't been following along lately, a week and a half ago, after a live stream, I was down here on the floor just like spreading stuff out to make some plans and see what I had, what I didn't have. And yeah, the carpet was wet. And so I pulled everything off the wall, and it was called a plumber. They came out, made sure it wasn't a pipe problem, and they're like, yeah, it's a groundwater problem. And so their best guess, and mine as well, was that there's the front gutters for the roof dump down a downspout, and then that feeds into a 4-inch corrugated pipe that was buried in the ground. And so we all kind of thought that corrugated pipe probably got wrecked, and it was just dumping all the water off the roof into the ground right on the other side of this wall. So I spent 2 days digging up 50 feet of 4-inch corrugated and replacing it. Unfortunately, in the process of digging it up, I didn't get to a part of it that was like broken. There were some parts with holes, but I think those holes were from me. So I'm not totally convinced that that's what it was, which is why I've left this torn apart. You know, that was last weekend. That was a week and a couple of days ago. And so, yeah, I've had everything still pulled out from the wall, and I've been waiting for a big rainstorm. This was a long rainstorm. It wasn't really a big rainstorm. So I'm still kind of worried. I wish that we'd gotten a big rainstorm, but yeah, a lot of water got dropped in the last 24 hours, and it's bone dry. So I'm hoping that, yeah, the new 50-foot section of corrugated. What I did notice is that they had patched they had patched it before. There was a section where they had a connector and then another connector. So maybe it was just leaking at those connectors. They looked pretty good, but now there's a continuous run of 50 feet all the way down out the back. So no matter what, it'll be better now. And yeah, that's why the set has been all torn apart. But man, it's nice, man. Sometimes when shit like that happens, it really makes you appreciate certain things. And that's what's happening right now. I'm just looking back here like, oh God, it's just so nice to have this big chunk of carpet and real estate. Cause this is where, like, when I'm trying to figure out like setups and different combinations of parts, I'll just like get all my shit and just spread it all out over the floor. So like I'll have like all my tiny whoop props all spread out, and then I can just like kind of visualize it and look across them and gaze upon the madness. A little slice of what it's like to be me. It's a scary place. In the chat, Danzilla the Terrible was first. Kevin Sumner was next. Mayan Hawk, Douglas Otwell, Frank Nicholas, Hockey Rounds, Adam Weston, Mac FPV Haters Gonna Hate, Titan, Mr. Blue Sky, Tongue Out FPV, Northern Tier, Dre the Drone Guy, Mac FPV, Mr. Blue Sky, Technique, CBFPV, Ethan W, Northern Tier, Casey Cohen, Adam Weston, Traffics AU, Brad Mondin, Brandon's Baked Beans, FPV, The Grayest of Bushes, Kevin Sumner, TX Flyer Ken, bunch of new people. What's up, new folks? I hope you enjoy. Hang out. learn a little something, ask some questions. These live streams are Q&A first and foremost. The questions, the amazing questions that get asked in chat, are the most important thing to these live streams and to all of you learning. If you have a question, minimum 10 more people have that exact same question. Even if it's a dumb question, it's really not. There are plenty of new people. I don't care if you're 5 years into the hobby and you have some silly question, please ask it. There are a whole bunch of other people that are 6 and 7 and 8 years into the hobby that have that same question. So yeah, load the chat up with any questions. The best way to ask questions is by putting at CiottiFPV or just CiottiFPV somewhere in there. If you do that, it will light up an orange like this, and I will know that you're talking directly to me. If you want to support me, you can do a super chat. That'll obviously get you a bunch of attention. But all you got to do is type CiottiFPV. You don't have to put the at in front of it, but you do have to spell it right. And there's no space between Ciotti and FPV. If you do that, if you type it like this, CiottiFPV, it'll light up an orange, and I will read your comment. There you go. There it is without the at. I will read your comment, and we will talk about it, like properly talk about it, not just like 2-word answers. You know, we do sort of deep dives here. This is I'm not the best at like beginner stuff, like people that are brand new getting up in the air. I'm not great at that. I'm really good at taking somebody that's been up in the air for a while and getting them over the plateau that they've hit, or just sort of FPV 102 kind of stuff. Digging deeper into what Throttle Expo is and how to use it, how to dial it in, how to set it up. That's the main thing that we're going to handle tonight after we get through all of the Q&A. So yeah, hope that's what you're looking for, because that's what you found. What else is happening? Hold on, let me start getting caught up on chat a little bit. CBFPV says, hey. Brandon's Baked Beans says, Throttle Expo gang represent. JB and its Blunty can go eat a big slice of cake. Why do you say that? Do those two say that Throttle Expo is a bad thing or something like that? That's sort of the subtext that I'm picking up on. Brandon's Baked Beans also says, I put midpoint at 50% on all my rigs. I know there's other ways to do it, but that's just what my fingers and brain expect. I've never had my midpoint that high, but midpoint is completely personal. Like, you guys cannot take my midpoint that I use and run that. That will be wrong. The midpoint is basically dried food on my shirt. The midpoint is best set wherever your cruising throttle is. So I know Brandon does a lot of long range stuff, and long range pilots, they don't want to cruise around at 30 miles an hour. It would take them forever to get where they're going. So they'll usually cruise around at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour so that they can get to where they're going and get back. It also makes the footage look a lot better when you're going. If you're 200 feet up and you're going 30 miles an hour, it's a snooze fest. If you're going 60 or 70 miles an hour, it's a lot more interesting. So that might be why Brandon is able to put his midpoint up at 50% and have it actually help. The tough thing about Throttle Expo is that it can really hurt you, and you got to be careful with which rigs you use it on, and how much of it you put in there. On the tiny whoops, I run a lot of it. Like the maximum you can run is 1.0. I run 0.4. So almost half the maximum amount of Throttle Expo that Betaflight will let you use is what I run on the tiny whoops. The tiny whoops are for flying inside, which is close quarters, and you don't really fly all that fast. So tiny whoops are sort of the opposite scenario of long range, where with long range you're cruising at a higher throttle percentage to cover that ground. With tiny whoops, you're not. You're going slowly so that you can shoot that tiny little gap that's only a half an inch bigger than the whoop itself. And so your cruising throttle percentage is typically a lot lower with tiny whoops. Not always, though. I also run really high kV motors. And so a really high kV motor will have your hover point be lower. The higher the kV, the lower the hover point, right? Like, we all have the same throttle throw, And so if you have more power, if you have a rig with more power, that throttle throw is going to be completely different than a rig with like very low power. So folks that are flying like really low kV, 19,000, 20,000 kV motors, their hover point is going to be a lot higher, and they're going to have to change the way that that Throttle Expo is set up. So all this to say, like, do not ever copy anyone else's Throttle Expo, and also do not ever copy Throttle Expo from one rig that you've got to another, unless those two are completely identical. And like, I really mean completely identical. Like, if one has 20,000 kV motors and the other has 22,000 kV motors, it's like, again, Throttle Expo can hurt. It can literally make the throttle resolution worse if you don't set it properly. So yeah, be really careful with it. Like, if Throttle Expo set incorrectly is worse than no Throttle Expo. So you really got to be careful. There's sort of, it's a situation where there's like no free lunch. Like, on the top of the throttle and on the bottom of the throttle, it's going to make the situation worse. So you got to really make sure that you get your midpoint set perfectly. And we're going to dive more into that, and I'm going to show you what, I can like visually show you what's happening with it. And we're even going to fly a bunch of batteries, and I'm going to show you how to adjust it in the OSD so that you can do it on the fly. I find that to be the best way of setting it up. It's also really important for you to learn how to do that, because at some point you will need to change it. So for example, right, I set these tiny whoops up with the Throttle Expo and the throttle midpoint for here, for this spot. Mainly the basement here, which is basically like an 800, 700 square foot apartment. When I take these tiny whoops outside of this house and fly them pretty much anywhere else, it's a much bigger space, and I want to go faster, and I want to cover more ground. And in doing so, I'm going to cruise at a higher throttle percent. And if I don't change the Throttle Expo to match that, they feel terrible, because your cruising throttle is in a point where it's making the situation worse. It's in a steeper point of the S curve that you're adding in there. So it's really important that you know how to quickly and confidently change that Throttle Expo on the fly, unless you never, ever, ever, ever fly your rigs in different locations, right? Like, if you have a tiny whoop, 65mm tiny whoop that you only ever fly in the house, and you literally never take it outside the house, then you're fine. If you have a 5-inch rig that you only ever fly on a football field, and you never fly a bigger or smaller space than that, you're fine. But that's pretty rare. You owe it to yourself to know how to do this quickly in the OSD. The other thing is, being able to change it quickly in the OSD is the best way for you to find the perfect midpoint. And finding the perfect midpoint is so important. Like, if you're not willing to spend a little bit of time finding the right midpoint, don't add Throttle Expo. It's only gonna make this, I guarantee you, it will make the situation worse if you're not willing to spend a few batteries understanding and dialing in the midpoint. Cool? Make sense, friends? Hopefully I didn't lose anybody yet. We'll dive into detail, and I'll be able to visually show you what's happening in a little bit here. So if you're a little bit lost, I'll get you caught up. Don't you worry. Kevin Sumner says, "Say the date and shill." Thank you, brother. Today is Monday, February 12th. For anybody just listening, YouTube does not do a good job putting the dates on these on any videos, really, especially live streams. CiottiFPV.com is my little tiny website where you can support me and all of the wild and wacky things that I do. My streaming schedule is right here. Patreon, as it says, helps me out the most, and you get the most benefit. If you join my Patreon for as little as $3 a month, that's 10 cents a day or 7.5 cents per hour of live streams that I do every single month, you're going to get access to a private YouTube playlist with 80-some unreleased edits, half-done edits, sketchy flying I don't want to be public. The gnarliest dive you'll probably ever see is on there. There are some Patreon-only live streams that we've done, all kinds of good stuff. You'll get access to the Patreon page with a ton of really good tech articles that I've written and or stolen from other people. You'll get full access to the Discord, and access to a couple of Facebook groups. It's well worth the $3 a month. Etsy has some really fun stickers and hardware that you can get. Teespring has some really fun shirts like this one and a whole lot more. And then over on Fiverr, you can book time with me. I've been in this for about 8 years, and I've been really paying attention the whole time, trying to figure out what the best motors are, what the ESC is that doesn't catch on fire, how to build these things properly so that they're bulletproof, how to fly really good, how to tune, all kinds of good stuff. If you're a year into the hobby and you want the amount of knowledge that somebody that's 2 years into FPV has, this is how you do it. You spend a little bit of time with somebody that's 8 years in, and they can drop all of the good juicy nuggets on you. That's a weird thing to say out loud. There's also a PayPal here. What is happening with this Stream Deck? I feel like... No, now it's working. I feel like when I hit the button, it doesn't work, and I have to hit the button a second time. Am I just hitting it too gentle? Maybe. Nope, there it goes. Why is it doing that? Nope, yeah, I'm hitting the button too gentle. There we go. PayPal, if you want to support me directly and you would rather not do a super chat because YouTube takes 30%, and then a whole bunch of affiliate links. It's 2024, my friends. If you're doing an order on the internet and you're not using an affiliate link, you are hurting somebody that's creating content for you on YouTube. Get it together. What are you doing? Change all your bookmarks over to affiliate links. That's the easiest thing to do. Then you don't have to worry about it. Pick whoever your favorite content creators are, grab one of their affiliate links to each of the websites that you like the most, and away you go. And if they don't have a website that you order from, look for another content creator that might have it. I have affiliate links to Weedlead FPV, Get FPV, Newbie Drone, FPV Cycle, Amazon, Race Day Quads, Oh My God, Brain 3D, HD0, Flywoo, Emacs, Banggood, and Camera Better. Oh, and AliExpress. So all you have to do is hit the affiliate link at any point before you check out, and that person's code will be in your cart. And when you check out, they will get 1 to 6% of your entire order. If you spend $1,000, you could potentially make a content creator $60. I think that's what that math. Yeah, that's the math. Most websites are not 6%, but some of them are. So especially if you're doing a big order, think about the people whose stuff you watch on YouTube. Try to find an affiliate link. Change your bookmark to it, and you'll be helping them out a ton. And maybe they'll have even more videos for you to watch or better quality videos for you to watch. Cool? Do it. It's fun. You'll feel good about yourself too, man. At least I do when I remember to use other people's affiliate links. Ethan W says, I'm thinking of making a vulture build. What? From Straw Hat. Oh, okay. I read it. You're going to make a vulture build with straw. From Straw Hat FPV, I was wondering what the biggest build you've ever flown is. I don't know if I've flown anything bigger than 6-inch. I'm sure I have. I'm sure I've flown a lifter at some point. I'm just not remembering it at the moment. Although usually when people offer to let me fly their lifters, I say no, because I don't want to be the person on the sticks when the ESC fails and it falls out of the sky with a $3,000 camera on it. So I might not have flown a lifter. I've said no 2 or 3 times. No, I have flown a lifter. I flew a lifter at 2 or 3 rampages ago, and the only reason I flew it is because he didn't have the camera on it. So it wasn't that, it was only like $1,000 build instead of being like a $4,000 aircraft. And without the camera on it, it just feels big and heavy, but not like absurdly big and absurdly heavy. This was also back in the days that we hadn't really figured out the perfect motor prop frame combo for lifters. So yeah, they didn't fly quite as good. I'm sure if the camera had been on it, it would have been a disaster to fly. As it was, without the camera, it just felt like a big-ass, fat, heavy 5-inch rig that made a funny noise. So, yeah. That was either a 7 or 8-inch rig. So, that would be the biggest thing that I've flown. Yeah, I mean, big-ass heavy rigs fly like big-ass heavy rigs. It's whether it's a 6-inch prop, a 7-inch prop, 8-inch prop, like as the props get bigger and as the rigs get heavier, they get slightly less. They just feel it. They feel exactly like that in the air. If you have the exact right combination of motors and props, it definitely helps. But rigs that are heavier than a kilogram are never going to fly like a 5-inch rig. It's just, physics, yo. So yeah, I don't really like. I'm not like, oh, I'm dying to fly a 10-inch rig. Like it would fly like a big ass heavy rig. There's nothing like super insane about the bigger rigs to me. The really, in my opinion, the really cool part about the big ass builds is other people. Other people watching you fly the big builds is really cool. And that's another reason why I always say no to lifters, because I want to watch someone else fly a lifter. Like, that's the cool part. Like, seeing a fucking red Komodo just hurled through the air is really cool. And I get to sit there like, oh, maybe they'll crash it. Try not to think like that. But come on, we're Americans. We grew up on fucking NASCAR and just motorsports death fest. Luckily, it's a lot safer now. But yeah, ingrained in our brain is like this love of destruction. Maybe that's just human nature. I don't know. I have a feeling that might be a more American experience than human nature. Denzel the Turbo says, hello, let's go. Atomic Rebel says, air or acro for freestyle? So acro refers to, you probably know this, Atomic Rebel, but just for new folks, acro refers to no accelerometer. Air, I think what you're asking is actually air mode or no air mode. When you're in acro, you can turn air mode on or off. I don't know of a flight mode called air or called air mode. I only know of angle mode, horizon mode, and acro. Angle mode and horizon mode have the accelerometer on. Acro mode does not. So in acro mode, there's no self-leveling. You're totally on your own. Air mode basically boosts the PIDs at 0 throttle. So if you go 0 throttle, the quad will be stable. So if you hammer it and you fling it upside down and you go 0 throttle, without air mode, it'll wobble all over the place because the motors will go to idle and the PID loop will not be running. Even if it was running, it wouldn't have enough power at idle to keep the quad stable. So air mode boosts that authority at 0 throttle. So when you do that and you go to 0 throttle, it will use enough power to keep it dead steady as it hurls through the air. So I think what Atomic Rebel's question is air mode or no air mode for freestyle, and air mode for sure. Like, there are almost no situations where you would want to turn air mode off. And yeah, like when you have air mode off, if you ever go 0 throttle, there's going to be incredible instability in certain situations, like when you're dropping altitude. So for freestyle, it's really important to run air mode all the time, or at least have it on a switch that you can quickly turn it off and then back on. Like turning air mode off with the momentary switch is actually a really good idea that I should do one of these days. But very, very, very rarely do I have a situation where turning air mode off would have helped anything. Usually, like, turning air mode off does help with when you stick to an object and it goes rah, and it won't come off the object. If I had air mode on the momentary, when it did that, I'd be able to flip that and it would come off the object. But like, when that happens, I've crashed, so I just disarm and then rearm and fly away. Like, it's like, it would be cool to have it, but it's not like, as evidenced by the fact that I haven't done it yet, it's not like a deal breaker. It's not like a thing that would really help anything, per per se. It would just be kind of cool to have it. I'll do it someday. Someday I'll dive into some OpenTX videos and figure out how to set air mode on the momentary switch. Well, other way around, how to turn air mode off with the momentary switch. Hopefully I decrypted the DaVinci Code and answered the question that you meant to ask, because the way that it was worded there, there's not necessarily an answer for it. If I haven't asked your question, reword it in a different way, and I'll hopefully be able to figure out what you're really looking to get at, what you're really getting at there. Muddertskin says, I ordered a couple of supposedly HappyModel Modula 6 ELRS AIOs off AliExpress. Who wants to place bets on whether they show up and are the real thing? I mean, HappyModel is, they're not really, but like HappyModel is kind of like a knockoff company. They're not, but like, stay with me here, right? Like, so I feel like if you're ordering like a knockoff product from a knockoff company in the first place, then if you get a knockoff of a knockoff, that's pretty not lucky. I don't know. Brandon McBean says, JB and it's Blunty are anti-Throttle Expo. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was too. I was anti-Throttle Expo for many, many, many years, back before I really like dove into it and understood it and tried it and like dialed it in perfectly. After I went through all of that, I realized that it's incredibly important for it is important. It's incredibly important for these really high KV tiny whoops. I won't say that it's important for any other rigs. You could argue that it's important for Cinewhoops because elevation control is incredibly obvious in Cinewhoop footage. But with like 5-inch rigs, all right, so here's how it works. Basically, the more variability in your ground speed, the less important Throttle Expo is. Less important is not the right thing to say there, though. The right wording would be, the more chances there are that adding Throttle Expo can hurt you. Because of what we talked about earlier. If you've, like, so a 5-inch freestyle rig is the perfect example of this. You take a 5-inch freestyle rig to a football field, and you're nose down, hauling ass, and your cruising throttle is going to be 40%, 45%, 50%. You then take that 5-inch rig to a much smaller location, and you're going to fly it a lot slower. And you're going to use 30%, 35% cruising throttle. If you don't adjust, if you're using a bunch of Throttle Expo on that rig and you don't adjust the midpoint, in one of those scenarios, it's going to suck to fly. So with Throttle Expo, you have to be willing to learn and play around a little bit and tune it. And that's what, that's why we're going to be able to do an entire live stream about it tonight. Once you've gone through that, and once you truly understand what it does, and you've felt it, and you've dialed it in, and you really understand it, I'm sure, for the record, I'm sure those two guys completely understand what Throttle Expo is, how to tune it, how to set it up. But I'll bet you that the two of them have not spent a couple of hours and or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 batteries dialing it in. I know for a fact that Joshua has never flown one of these crazy KV tiny whoops where it's incredibly important, and I'm pretty sure that neither one of them spends much time flying Cinewhoops because they're not pilots that fly many gigs. I think Joshua maybe has flown a couple of gigs, but they're not like flying gigs once a month, twice a month, every month, or anything like that. They're both pretty hardcore 5-inch freestyle pilots, and with a 5-inch freestyle rig, unless you're flying the same spot over and over and over again, which Joshua kind of is, right? He flies his yard a lot, but his yard has that big long run up to the mountain, and then in his yard there's big spots, there's small spots. So even if he has experimented with Throttle Expo with the way that he flies, which is a lot of variability in ground speed, Throttle Expo becomes a lot less important and or detrimental. Tiny whoops, Cinewhoops, rigs that you cruise. Here's what I'll say. Builds that you cruise at roughly the same throttle position
benefit big time from Throttle Expo. That is really it all boiled down. If 90% of the time you cruise at roughly the same speed or throttle position, those two things are interchangeable. As you put the nose down more, you have to add more throttle to keep it from crashing into the ground, right? So those two things are interchangeable, your ground speed or your cruising throttle position. That's what it's all about when it comes to Throttle Expo. Once you start playing around with Throttle Expo and looking at what your cruising throttle percentage is, what you realize is that on most rigs, for me at least, I'll say this for me, although I've heard this from a bunch of other people, what you realize is that almost all the time you'll cruise, unless it's long range, unless there's some crazy situation, right? Most people, most of the time, with most quads, cruise around at between 35 and 40%. Let's say 30 to 40%. And you can absolutely set Throttle Expo to give you significantly better throttle control in that 30 to 40% range, which is what I do on the Freestyle rigs. The 5-inch Freestyle rigs have less Throttle Expo, and when you don't add a ton of Throttle Expo, the curve doesn't get super aggressive, and you can have a rig that is plenty dynamic, and you can cruise around at 30% throttle or 40% throttle, and it's still going to give you a benefit of much better throttle resolution and the ability to move the throttle stick more without the quad jumping up in the air and without you doing this incredibly annoying elevation bounce all over the damn place. All that being said, if you've got the time and the money, the best possible scenario is to leave it linear and just put thousands and thousands and thousands of hours into flying. That is the best case scenario. But even if you do that and you get super, super, super good with the throttle throw, adding Throttle Expo on a rig that doesn't have this massive variability in the cruising throttle, it's just going to help. Like it just is. Like that's just them's just the facts, yo. So we're going to get caught up on chat, and then we're going to really dive into it, and I'll show you Throttle Expo on, Throttle Expo off. I'll show you how to adjust it. I'll show you what it looks like when you adjust it wrong, what it looks like when you adjust it right. It'll be pretty obvious. It is most evident when flying tiny whoops inside the house. Tiny whoops inside the house is one of the hardest things that you will ever do, especially when you want to try to do power loops and Matty flips and stalls and throws and all the crazy shit that I'm obsessed with. It is so, so, so difficult. When you fly outside, the gaps that you shoot are feet. They are feet in measurement. When you fly in the house, gaps are measured in inches. And it does not scale. A 5-inch rig is this big, a tiny whoop is this big. This is not feet big. You're not flying a 5-inch rig that's 5 feet wide. It's like 1 foot wide. And then when you fly a tiny whoop, it's not 1 inch wide. It's like 5 inches wide. So the difference in the size of the rig does not match up in any way with the size of the gaps that you're shooting outside versus inside. Flying inside the house is absurdly difficult. Most people try it a bunch and then just give up because it's really frustrating. If you want to stick with it, understand that it's going to be frustrating. You're going to have to work your ass off. You're going to have to fly tons of batteries, and you're going to have to pay attention to stuff like this and stuff like the weight of your rig if you really want to get good inside the house. So Throttle Expo is one of the absolute best ways that I have found to make flying inside the house much more realistic, much more enjoyable, and it allows you to do the crazy shit you see me doing. Cool? TX Flyer Ken says, what do you think about the BetaFPV Meteor75 Pro brushless whoop quadcopter 1S HD quad? Which video system is on? Well, I guess it doesn't matter which video system is on it. For the last like 3 or so weeks, I've spent a ton of time with a very similar build to that. It's a Walksnail carrying BetaFPV AIO'd 75 millimeter build. I do also have a Beta75 Pro frame with 1002 motors that I've been trying on this build. Essentially, what I'm trying to figure out is what is the best lightweight but powerful motor and frame and propeller combination for a 75 millimeter sized rig to carry Walksnail around. And I've been having a really hard time finding motors that are powerful enough with good enough response time that are also as light as possible. This 75 Pro frame with the 1002 motors and the 45 millimeter, so these are Flywoo 1002 23,500 motors, kV motors. I wish they were 25,000 kV or 26 or 27,000 kV, but these are the highest kV 1002s that we have access to, which is what you want. And this frame motor propeller combo, ignore the tri-blades. This is just me being clickbaity for a future thumbnail. You would not want to do this. You would want to. It's. I haven't flown it on the tri-blades yet. It's awesome on the bi-blades. This frame motor prop combo on this Canopy AIO VTX is pretty good. It's very heavy though for a tiny whoop. So the intended use of this build is to fly jungle gyms outside. Most apartment complexes or housing developments or just neighborhoods will have a fancy jungle gym. And that jungle gym will have the coolest setup of dive gaps, slides, just regular gaps, walls that you can like wall ride. It's crazy. It is so much fun. And there are these jungle gyms all over the damn place. So you can just go from complex to complex to complex and fly a different awesome jungle gym every single time you go out and fly. I've got a 75 millimeter analog build on 802 27,000 kV motors that is brilliant for what I call jungle gym bashing. With the extra 6 grams of Walksnail, and in this case, I just realized that the heat shield is still on this, so this is actually an additional 7.5 grams. The situation becomes a lot more difficult. I'm kind of shocked at how much harder it's been to find a perfect motor prop combo for this thing. What I have kind of realized though is that this Pro frame with the bigger motors, with the bigger propellers, is too heavy for what I want. I want more accuracy. I want less weight. The jungle gym, like the monkey bars, for example, right? The monkey bars are a gap that's like this big. And this is a little bit too small for a setup that's this heavy. This frame and motor and prop combo weighs like an additional 10 or 11 grams versus a Meteor 75 Air frame with the smaller props, with smaller motors that can control the smaller props. And that weight differential is mega. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at the fact that the all-up weight is like 40 grams, 40-something grams, adding 10 grams is like 20% more weight. Blow that up to a 5-inch rig, right? A 5-inch rig that's 600 grams that you add 20% more weight to is going to be is going to go from 600 grams to 720 grams. Those two are going to fly completely different. That is a massive weight savings. That's like putting a second battery on the damn thing. That is going to drastically change the way the rig flies. Switching these drastically changes the way the rig flies. And when it's really heavy, it just wants to keep its momentum. So when you're trying to line up that tight little monkey bar gap, and you come into it at from a corner, because you're not just going to fly infinitely far back and just run a straight line, right? We're always cornering and changing directions. The lighter weight will allow it to just lock in and just fly straight. When you turn it, it won't slide as much. It'll just turn with you, and it'll just go right through the gap. So the weight of your rig has a massive effect on your ability to line up and shoot gaps a lot more reliably. All that being said, if you're just going to rail the thing around in front of the house and fly it like a toothpick or like a 3-inch freestyle rig, then this is actually what you would want to go with, because it's going to give you more power. And just throwing it up over trees and stuff like that, you're going to benefit from the extra power. In my opinion, that is not the right scenario for a tiny whoop. Like, tiny whoops are crippled in terms of flight performance by the guards. And the guards are there so that you can bump off walls and stuff, and bump off the jungle gym and not, break a motor, break a prop. So if you're just going to throw a rig around in front of your house and fly it in between trees and over trees, and maybe through the garden where there's a hole that's this big, a toothpick is going to have way more efficiency. It's going to have way better flight performance, way more power. It's going to kind of do everything better. So this Meteor75 Pro setup, it gets into this realm of like, it doesn't really do anything all that good. It's sort of just stuck a little bit. This is why the 2-inch whoops, they're really out in the woods. Like, if you build a 2-inch whoop to carry an O3 air unit, awesome, got it, good to go. If you build a 2-inch whoop to carry an analog camera or a Walksnail or an HD0 setup, you just have something that's too heavy to shoot tight gaps, and then it doesn't have the power or the efficiency to really haul itself over big trees, right? So you're stuck in this kind of no man's land. This approaches that no man's land, but you're kind of blurring the lines, right? If instead of shooting these monkey bar gaps, you've got a garden in your house that has gaps that are this big, this is perfect for that, right? This is the perfect tool for that job. But usually you're in a scenario where you're either shooting infinitely small gaps with a tiny whoop, or you're just throwing it in between trees where the gap between the two trees is 10 feet and it's easy to kind of get through there, right? So that is sort of, I don't really have any specific thoughts on that exact rig because I've never flown one. I've never really seen one. But I've been building something that is incredibly similar to that rig. So, yeah, this feedback is based around the all-up weight. And like specific builds, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter who makes the build. It doesn't matter what it's called. The way that any rig flies is mainly based on the all-up weight, the amount of power that it has, and the aerodynamics. And the aerodynamics are basically just, does it have a tiny whoop frame, or does it have open propellers? Does it have prop guards, or does it have open propellers? That's the bulk of the aerodynamic change between one rig and the other. So, yeah, I don't know that specific rig, but everything that I just told you and all of the live streams, there's like a dozen live streams from the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks, with me dialing this thing in. Those live streams are all great. And like, if you want to dive deeper, that's what you would want to kind of watch. And there's timestamps on all of them, thanks to Apache Smoke Wounded Sniper. So it's easy to get through the 2 and 3 hour streams that I've been doing by just going through the time codes and boom. Oh, here he's talking about these motors. Here he's talking about these propellers. Bang, 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 bang. Cool. The other thing that factors into aerodynamics is the propellers. Basically, how many blades do the propeller has? How many blades does the propeller have has a lot to do with aerodynamics as well. Kevin Sumner says, ever seen a 1S smoke stopper? I can't ever remember seeing one. Nope, I wish somebody would make one. But yeah, I've never seen one. And I've been looking for one forever. So if there had been one, I would have seen it more than likely. Rodney says, that validated my behavior. I tend to set it different for each quad. The motivation is to make each one feel the same to me. Yep, that is perfect, Rodney. Rodney is talking about Throttle Expo. We're back onto that. Motivation is to make each one feel the same. I spend a lot of time trying to make all of these drastically different builds feel the same, so that I don't have to have a completely different set of muscle memory for tiny whoops versus 5-inch freestyle rigs. You're going to have to no matter what, but you can make that, if without effort, the difference in your muscle memory between tiny whoop and 5 inches this big, with some effort, you can close the gap. And it really does help. Throttle Expo. The main thing that's going to close that gap is prop selection, motor selection, all up weight. Throttle Expo, it will help. What the main thing that it will help with is that quads that have a mega power to weight ratio, right? 5-inch rigs are the best example of this. They have like 10-to-1 power to weight ratios. Tiny whoops are usually around 5-to-1 or 6-to-1. So that's a massive difference there. We've got the same amount of throttle throw. We don't use a different transmitter for our 5-inch rigs, for our tiny whoops, right? Maybe we should. Maybe we should have a 5-inch transmitter that the throttle stick is like another 2 inches long, so that we have a much longer throttle throw, because we have so much more power on that throttle throw. Don't do that. That'll probably cause more problems than it solves. That is where Throttle Expo would definitely work, because with a quad that's got 10-to-1 power to weight ratio, the throttle is going to be very touchy. Versus a rig with 5-to-1 power to weight ratio, it's going to be less touchy. The problem becomes, with a 5-inch rig, we're shooting 10-foot gaps. With a tiny whoop, we're shooting 10-inch gaps. So Throttle Expo is a way to get the throttle resolution under control on all of your builds, so that they're all in a situation where you can move the throttle a little bit and the rig doesn't hammer up into the sky. You can set all of your rigs up so that the throttle is a little bit softer and is a little bit more sort of in control. The problem comes in where what I was talking about before, 5-inch rigs, a lot of times you don't want as much Throttle Expo as you probably need in order to do that, because the variability of speed that you're going to carry is all over the damn place. Luckily, the motor development, the motor and propeller development that we've had over the last 10 years for those specific 5-inch builds has really nailed down propellers and motors that at the cruising throttle that we run at, it's nice and soft, just sort of naturally. So we don't really need to add a ton of Throttle Expo, because mechanically we've done that with just thousands and thousands of people flying millions of batteries on those rigs. Eventually tiny whoops will get there, but it will take an awful lot more than just HappyModel making motors to do so. We will have to have, just like with those guys, we will have to have 4, 5, 6 different manufacturers making the same motor sizes and the same KVs, but with different thicknesses of magnets, different air gaps, different stator setups, different winding methods, different materials that they wind, silver coated, copper, like all of the development that's gone into 2306s and 2207s will need to go into 0802s before we've got a mechanical system here that has really soft and in control in control throttle control. So for the time being, for right now, let's use the tools that we have, which are Throttle Expo, to get these little guys under control. Because at the moment, the way that we select motors and props is what's the lightest possible option with the most possible power. Doing that will get you more benefits. Like making your motor and propeller decision with that in mind will get you a better flying quad than using any other aspects of motor selection. Because the biggest problem with tiny whoops is a lack of power to weight ratio. And we're getting there. There have been massive improvements in the last year or two, but with 5-inch rigs, those massive improvements were like 8 years ago. So we are way, way, way behind. But hey, we're getting there. Now that 5-inch rigs are boring and there's like almost no improvements left, it's being pretty black and white, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, we've turned to smaller rigs, and we're perfecting the way that they fly, which is great. Mothi says, I got the Firefly motors for my 65 Walksnail, then realized 2 of my FETs are blown. Motors tab on the RPMs were not matching up. Welcome to FPV, Mothi! It's terrible sometimes. Other times it's great. Just suck up the terrible times and just wait. Eventually it'll be great again. You'll be up in the air. Kevin Sumner says, no, we got that. Oh, wait. Brandon Zwapian says, on rates being personal, one time I copied the rates from Quickflash, the Emu Flight dev, and I had I had vertigo and a headache for a full 24 hours. My brain was not ready for that one. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, rates are super, super, super personal. Never think that you're going to take somebody else's rates and like actually use them. If you ever take somebody else's rates, all you're going to accomplish is trying something totally different to see if there's any element of it that you maybe like a little bit better. So yeah, never, ever, ever think that you can just take somebody else's rates and fly them. Taking somebody else's rates is like an exploration in someone else's brain. Maybe you realize that their center stick sensitivity being less than yours feels really good. Go right back to your rates and change your center stick sensitivity and don't look back. That is the only real reason to run somebody else's rates. C Will misspelled my name, but I just happened to see it. It didn't light up an orange because he misspelled it. He says, I know you talk about tuning to be person specific. I get that for sure. But with how popular your Freestyle 65mm build is and how many people have that exact setup, why not post a dump? The main reason is that my CLI dump has a whole bunch of throttle smoothing, basically. And my setup has a lot of latency, which most people hate. Also, it's because even though the Ultimate Freestyle Tiny Whoop uses a lot of the same parts, these parts are never in stock at the same time. And even if you buy the HappyModel ELRS F4 2G4 5 amp AIO, there are like 6 different versions of this AIO. There are versions of this AIO that are as much as 1 gram heavier and lighter. There are 4 different gyros that you can get in this AIO, and there is no indication whatsoever when you buy that AIO which one you're going to get. Like, there's going to be a bunch of specs on the product page. A lot of times those specs were put up there as soon as they got that for the first time, and they've never updated them. Even if they have updated them, HappyModel changes it like every other month. So on the shelf, there might be the V3.1 sitting right next to the V3, and they don't write that on the back of the package, so they have no way of knowing which one is which. They're certainly not going to open it up and plug it into Betaflight and go to the CLI and type status and figure out what gyro is on this one. And my dump is going to have, like, so for example, too, like, I wouldn't know which dump to give you guys because of the 3 Ultimate Freestyle Tiny Whoops I have, they've all got completely different filtering and completely different PIDs because all 3 of them have different gyros on them. And one of them has the heavier AIO, and that one has it different. So there is just way too much variability. And then we talk about motors. Hey, I want the 36,000 kV motors. Those are sold out this week. Well, the 32,000 kVs are almost as good. Well, cool. Here's the dump for my 32,000 kV rig. That's totally different than the dump from the 36,000 kV rig versus the 0603 rig versus the 0802 rig versus the 0702 rig. Like, it's all over the damn place. Luckily, dead-ass stock Betaflight flies brilliantly. And then every couple of live streams, I go over the incredibly simple way to tune nowadays, which is to take the top 2 sliders in the PID tab and just start pushing them over. And you push them over from 1.0 to 1.2, and then you push the D gains. If it doesn't act weird or sound weird, you push First you push the D-gain slider up to 1.2 and you fly it. You make sure it's not weird. Then you push both sliders up by 0.2, fly it, make sure it's not weird. Then you push them up, and you just keep pushing those sliders up until the thing explodes and takes off on its own, and then you back them off, and that's that. And then as you fly that rig and you beat the motors and the props up, you need to be able to pull those sliders down. Yet another reason that I don't post my dumps. Like, my dump changes... my PIDs change every couple of weeks as I beat the motors up more, and I have to move those sliders down. So, like... this also kind of factors into, like, my entire philosophy of... like, and it even breaks down into, like, why I've chosen this medium, right? Like, I do these long form content live streams so that I can teach you all how to tune and the super simple ways to do it so that you can move this up and down, because using somebody else's dump is a really good way to blow up a rig or hurt somebody or just have something that doesn't fly all that good, because there is an incredible amount of variability in the parts, even down to how much wear the parts have on them, how many crashes, how clean your builds are, which week you bought the HappyModel AIO, because it's going to have a different gyro, it's going to weigh different. So yeah, that's the main reason why. More often than not, in the last 8 years, I have found that using someone else's setup makes your build fly worse than either dead stock Betaflight or just dead stock Betaflight, where you've taken those top two sliders, pushed them up to the point where the quad will tell you, I'm not happy, and then you back it off a little bit. And then you crash it a whole bunch, and it'll tell you that it's unhappy again, and then you can back it off a bunch. And then you splurge, and you get a new set of motors and a new set of props, and it's nice and clean again, and then you push the sliders back up, because you know that you've cleaned that rig up, and you can kind of chase the dragon with that tuning. The Betaflight devs have made this. The Betaflight devs have worked so hard for so many years to get it to the point where it's at right now. Take advantage of that. Like, make them feel better about that unbelievable amount of work that they've done by just taking a little bit and farting around with these sliders a little bit, so that you can learn this and be able to completely customize your rig for the exact AIO, the exact motors, the exact gyro, the exact props, how many crashes, what your flying style is, what you want your footage to look like. Bang, 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 bang. On and on we go. There you go. How's that sound? Does that... I've heard from people before, like, you're an asshole for not giving us the dump. I know that you're just hiding secrets from us. And I'm like, yo, I spend fucking 10 hours a week, every week, dumping every single secret that I've got out into the internet. Just because you don't want to spend the time to watch these and get that info doesn't mean that I'm an asshole. It means that you're an asshole. So sit on it and rotate, you jerk. Yeah, like, no secrets from me, man. If it was really possible for all of you to build a completely identical rig to mine and for it to stay completely identical forever, I would fucking stop doing these live streams and start doing much more popular 20-minute, 15-minute, 10-minute content get way more subs, and just dump, just send this dump out into the universe, and you could all drop it on and have a great experience. But that's not it. That's just not how it works. It's one of the reasons why FPV is what it is. It's why it's such a difficult hobby. It's why we're all absolute lunatics for continuing to stay into this and yeah. Welcome to the game, my friends. Stupidly generous super chat from my dad. $50 towards the Whoop Camera Fund. Thank you, Dad. Very cool. David Ciotti is in the chat. He is who I've learned everything that I know, soldering and electronical engineering / electronical technicianing from. Show the man some love. Where is there it is. And we are at 110. Thank you, Dad. This is every time I compare a couple of Whoop cameras in the chat, there'll be a couple people saying, what about this camera? What about this other camera? What about this other camera? And it's like, I don't have them. I don't know. So this is an attempt to just buy every single Tiny Whoop camera that there is. Kevin Sumner actually has already bought a whole bunch of the Tiny Whoop cameras, and he's doing his own testing. And he's going to sell me all of the ones that he bought when he's done with his testing. And then any that I can find that are realistic for a Tiny Whoop that he didn't find, which I probably won't be able to find any, I'll buy separately. But yeah, so it's fine that this is, you know, been a little bit, this fund has been a little bit slow because I'm still waiting for Kevin to finish up his testing and I don't want to rush him. So yeah, thanks, Dad. Very cool. Where was I in Chad? There we go. Ramdonko says, playing with the settings, I put ESC RPM on the 65mm rig. Wait. Playing with the settings, put ESC RPM I think he meant to say on 65X, the results screen or whatever. 32,000 kV 0702 things equals some good numbers. I can't make hide nor hair of this. Playing with the settings, I put ESC RPM on 65X, the results screen or whatever. I'm sorry, Ram, I can't figure it out, brother. Tag me again and say that a little bit differently. And between this comment and your next one, I should be able to figure it out. Sorry, dude. I'm not connecting the dots. I'm sure there's a question there. I'm just not getting it. It's me, not you. Mr. Blue Sky says Audi Quattro rally cars in the 80s. Insane. Indeed. The S4 was quite the monster. Atomic Rebel says, thanks for the explanation. I meant air mode on versus off. I had a feeling that's what you meant. Awesome. Brad Mondin says, built a Walksnail 1S baby tooth today, just waiting on props and batteries from Pyro. That'll be very fun. I've been dragging my feet on, it's been cold out though, so it's fine. But yeah, I've got a 3-inch toothpick that needs Walksnail, so I'll be joining you in that adventure soon enough. Half-Baked 210 says, Half-Baked 210. See what you did there. Broscone, the resetting during arming Mobula 6 build was solved by flashing from BL Heli S to Blue Jay. That's weird. Stoked, what has more pep, 25,000 kV 802 or 26,000 kV 702? It depends on the all-up weight of the rig and the propellers that you run. If the rig is lightweight and you run bi-blade propellers, the 702 26,000s will have more response time. Response time is what gives you the pop or pep or whatever you want to call it, because the response time is how quickly the motors can spin up, and that's what makes the rig jump up into the air. You would think that the 802s would do a better job with that because it's a bigger motor. It's got more actual torque, but the problem with an 802 is the bell, the actual 802 bell, is significantly heavier, and it doesn't match up as good on the bi-blade propellers. So with the 802s, you end up going up to a tri-blade propeller, and now that propeller is heavier. So the prop and the motor bell are heavier, and the amount of power that the motor makes, torque that the motor makes, is not enough to offset that. 702, 26,000, 30,000, 32,000, 36,000 kV are just nuts. Like, it is, the motor is beautifully matched to that propeller, and the bell of the motor is nice and lightweight, and it just has this incredible ability to spin up and spin down, and it just gives you this really like lightning response time that, yeah, is just magic. Demo FPV says, my Cinelog 25 with the Action 2, the stock tune isn't locked. Do you recommend using the sliders to tune it? I'm not sure where to start. At this point, I almost never don't use the sliders. Back me up on this, Brandon. Would you go as far as to say the only reason to not use the sliders, thank you, not applicable. Would you say at this point the only reason to not use the sliders is if you can't get enough yaw? Nope, because you can put the sliders into roll pitch mode and that breaks yaw out. I can't think of a situation to not use the sliders. Oh, yeah, I can. Man, would that be a random situation? It would be a situation where, like, either the P gain or the I gain or the D gain, you just can't get it high or low enough on the sliders. But, boy, is that going to be a specific scenario. Like, you're probably not going to run into that. 99.9% of the time, the sliders are going to be able to get you there. And the sliders just make the situation so much simpler. My God. So, yeah, use the sliders. Cinelog 25 with an Action 2. That is a heavy-ass camera for a 2.5-inch rig. And that is more than likely where the problem is. You've got a camera that's all the way up front, and it's a heavy camera for a 2.5-inch propeller. So the situation that you're probably running into is that with the camera up front, it is loading down the front motors. So the front motors are having to just blast to pick up the weight of that Action 2. And so the front motors are probably in like an overheated state damn near all the time, and they can't make enough power. So to me, the right solution would be to find a front motor that's bigger, and the bigger motor is going to stay cooler, and it's also going to make more power. And that is going to sort of like virtually increase the PIDs on the front. What you can try is grabbing the D gain, exactly the same thing that I talk about with Tiny Whoops. Grab that D gain slider at 1.0 and put it up to 1.2. Fly it, make sure it's not angry. If it's not angry, take the top slider and the second slider and move them both up by 0.2. Fly it, make sure it's not angry. Move it again. Fly it, make sure it's not angry. Eventually it'll get angry, back them off. The P, I, and D gains do the bulk of the work in terms of getting a rig locked in. It's mainly the D gain slider though, but you can't just keep pushing the D gain slider without bringing the P gain along for the ride. So without spending money, that's what you can do to get that thing better locked in. But the correct fix is to find a bigger motor, maybe even a higher kV motor. The problem could also be that the motors that are on there are just not a high enough kV. The front motors might not be so overheated that you're starting to lose power from them. They might just not have enough kV to spin up when you need high enough and make enough power when you really need them to. So, yeah. If you wanted to dial in on that, take the rig out and aggressively fly it around a bunch. Bring it in as quick as you possibly can and touch the front motors and touch the rear motors. And if there's a drastic difference in temperature between the fronts and the rears, you would benefit from a bigger motor all around as a bigger heat sink. And the bigger motor is going to have more power. It's going to take more juice, but it's going to have more power. When you do that, it's going to be really important for you to not get a bigger motor with less kV. You're on 2.5-inch props, which don't make tons of power. The other thing you can do is try a propeller with more blades. This is the cheapest way to do it. If that has a 3-bladed propeller, try a 5-bladed propeller. Your response time is going to go to hell because the propeller is going to be a lot heavier, but it's going to make more thrust, and it's going to start to clue you into what the hell's going on. You could have a bunch of different problems. Maybe the PID tune is just too far backed off. That could totally be it. I suspect it's more than that. But yeah, this could be a bunch of different problems. The motors could be too low of a kV. The motors could be too small of a stator. It could be like weirdly frame related or aerodynamics related. So yeah. The first step would need to be narrowing down what the bulk of the problem is. It's probably a little bit of each, but there's one thing that's probably contributing like 70% of the problem. And if you can narrow it down and fix that one thing, that'll give you the best bang for your buck. So yeah, there you go. There's the next couple of weeks of your life. Grey Hat says, of course I'm hours late to the stream where you're talking about throttle, which I've been asking about. Check my DM on Discord when you get a chance. I will. Indeed, I'm very backed up. Anybody that's messaged me in the past like few days, yeah, I'm just super behind. Grey Hat also says, I got 3 free Eco 2 2004 2400 kV motors. What should I build? Too small for a Grinderino? No, not too small for a Grinderino. Too low of a KV though. 2400 kV is very low. That's like a 6S KV. And doing 6S on a micro really, it puts more stress on the ESC than you need to, and you don't really get much, if any, benefit from it. So I would actually sell those motors, to be honest. Just because the KV is so low. That KV is low enough that like you're gonna have to do 5 or 6S on it. And that's just kind of silly, in my opinion. There are other people that disagree, but in my experience, yeah, it doesn't make much sense. That's the problem with motors that are a lower KV like this, is that they handcuff you into like a very specific scenario. I guess the other thing you could do with those motors is run them on 4S, but then run them on like big ass 3.5-inch, like 5-blade propellers. You might be able to get enough thrust out of them, but then, you know, that at that point it becomes a Cinewhoop specifically. So, yeah, and Cinewhoops are not really fun to fly. They're a tool for doing cinematic work, gig work. Half-Baked says, teaching men to fish, indeed. David Ciotti says, just stopped in to say hi to the Foxtrot King of Atlanta. Oh, he's already in bed. It's 11:04. I missed it by 20 minutes. Damn it. Hopefully he watches the replay. Denzel the Terrible says, yeah, we're waiting for a video of CiottiFPV cutting a rug. I got to get a little bit better. The whole Sundays, the last 3 Sundays, I've gone to partner dance lessons with Maggie. Maggie was a belly dancer for many years and has a long history of just dance and loves it. Like the same way that we love FPV, Maggie loves dance. And so, yeah, I am partially doing the dance lessons to make her dreams come true of having a partner that actually cares. And in the process, it is pretty fun. And I, you know, like for my whole life, every time I've been in a situation where people have been dancing, I've thought to myself, man, it would be cool to know how to dance. And so, like, you know, luckiest dude ever, like with somebody that is willing to push me a little bit to go to these things. And now, you know, it's cool and it's fun and I'm loving being a little bit competent, but I'll be goddamned if the internet has any videos of me mechanically like just learning. But it's, I don't know, her and the instructor and like a bunch of people keep telling me like, Jesus, you're learning fast. So I don't know. But yeah, we'll get there'll be video evidence of it at some point. Curtis Hayes says, I'm the same as CiottiFPV. I show people with my hands what I'm seeing in my imagination. Are you Italian, Curtis? Your last name doesn't look Italian. My dad says, behave yourself. Never. Grey Hat says, the UAV something whoop 1S 2S preset tune is amazing. That's because UAV Tech is a genius. Mark Spatz is awesome. Grey Hat also says, do you ever touch other sliders if P and D gains get to a certain point? If you've maxed out the D gain slider and you still need more, you can go all the way down to the bottom, the master multiplier. I do move all of the sliders around, but 80 to 85 to maybe even 90% of the tune is the top 2 sliders. The stuff that I do with the other sliders, most people won't notice. I've been doing this for long enough, and I'm a picky enough bastard that I do notice. But most people won't, and the other sliders get pretty confusing pretty quick. So I typically don't really dive in there on the live streams because there'll be like 10 people that stay with me. The Fiverr sessions that people do with me, that is typically when like I'll dive in there and really dig in with their specific build to get it really tuned perfectly for what they want and what their taste is. On these streams, there are just so many different people. You know, in the Fiverr sessions, I sit there and ask like 20 some questions to perfectly dial in on exactly what is going to work best for this person and what they're using the quad for, be that like cinematic work, high speed stuff, slow speed stuff, around talent, not around talent, shit like that. On a live stream, like it would be a 12-hour long stream to try to do that in a way that it benefited everybody and every single person watching got something out of it. So it's just kind of tough. Not applicable with a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, homie. He says, shout out to the CiottiFPV sound pack. I hear hello friends every time I power on my radio and have here we go fuckers on a Switch. Nice. The CiottiFPV sound pack is something that you can get from my Patreon page. Just use the, I forget what the little tag is that I used for it. I almost certainly used CiottiFPV as a tag. So you'll just go in there and you'll use the tag CiottiFPV and that'll find it. Sleepless Art FPV Inc. says CiottiFPV deserves any donations for the content he pushes, especially with the Q&As, live streaming, whoop whoop, sending an FPV quad /whoop startup /power cycle tones to celebrate. Thank you, dude. Very kind of you to say. Mr. Blue Sky says, I have watched your 10 Betaflight secrets video 3 times, still dialing in settings on 4 different Ciotti builds, and it's different for each one. One size does not fit all. There you go, friends. Ramdanko says, getting some massive RPM results on the OSD. Gotcha now. No idea about calibrating. So interesting. So I'm gonna read between the lines, and I think you're getting like a lot of RPM from one motor and not a lot of RPM from the other motor. Try moving the motors around and see if it follows the motor or if it stays on the same ESC channel. That's going to be my first troubleshooting point. Barnaby Jones says, am I missing an easy fix? I have a new build and the OSD menu quit working. OSD shows up fine but disappears when I try stick commands to open the OSD menu. It worked yesterday, not today. Let me guess, Barnaby. It's a Walksnail rig, isn't it? I have that problem on these Walksnail rigs every once in a while, and I have no idea what's going on. But there is an easy fix, weirdly. So you're doing this to get into the menu, something that not, and then most people just use this to move around and navigate around the menu. A little tip that not many people know is that if you take the left one and push to the right, it puts you directly into that last menu item that gives you the option of like close, save and reboot, or whatever. And for whatever reason, when I do that on Walksnail and it doesn't show me the OSD, if I yaw to the right, it puts me to that last menu. And then if I yaw back to the left, it brings me into the regular menus and I'm good to go. So try that. If that's not it, I have no idea. There are no settings around it. Like, it's just there. Like, the stick commands either work or they don't. Like, there's nothing you can turn on or off that I've ever seen in Betaflight. So yeah, if that doesn't work, unfortunately I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, I have that same. I've had that problem for the first time ever on these Walksnail build in 8 years of doing this. I've never experienced that until like a month ago on the Walksnail builds, and I was just frustrated at one point, and I just like jammed the one stick to the side, and it popped to that menu, and I was like, oh. And then I backed off, and everything was fine. So try that. Kevin the Alien says, I've been thinking about it more and more. I want to get more physically active. You and me both, brother. You and me both. You gotta... Yeah, I don't have the answer yet. I mean, I do have the answer. You just have to do it. You put an alarm on your phone, and you don't ignore the alarm. And you do it every day. You got to do something every day, because you got to build it as a habit. So, yeah. For me, I've started to just barely dive back into it. What time is it? It's 11:30 already. I can go through this really quick. When my ex-wife left, I I had this massive kick in the ass to get into shape to look better for pictures and for new women. And that massive kick in the ass got the job done. And I started longboarding a bunch, jogging, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, yoga. And I felt fucking awesome. Like, straight up. Like, yes, I devoted like an hour and a half a day, every single day to it. But for me, with the mental health shit that I have going, it was also an exercise in literally staying alive. I just knew, I absolutely knew that I needed to do that to not, and all of those things were the amount of kick in the ass that I needed for me to be able to do it. Once I met Maggie, everything was more chill. I just immediately stopped doing it. I hate it. I hate exercise. As I get older, I realize that I need it. Maggie is a very healthy person. She works in health science, and yeah, I know that I need it. And I now have an alarm on my phone that goes off every day that says do push-ups, and that is something. Anything. You have to start with anything. And this is my anything that happens. When the alarm goes off at whatever it is, 5:30, no matter what I'm doing, I can absolutely take 60 seconds to get on the goddamn floor and do as many push-ups as I can on that particular day. I know that will turn into getting my yoga practice back. That is the one form of exercise that I don't absolutely hate. And I know that will turn into going for more walks, jogs, whatever. But you have to start with anything. And if that's 30 seconds of push-ups every day, that's what will kick it off. You will not be able to, unless you have a massive kick in the ass in your life, you will not be able to just instantly develop a half an hour a day yoga practice and a half an hour a day longboard walk, whatever it may be. Our brains just don't work that way. Like, we are pattern-based creatures. And if you're not actively exercising, your pattern does not include it, and it will be very hard to break out of that pattern. So you have to ease into it like that. So put an alarm on your phone that goes off every single day to do something that you don't absolutely hate, and it'll start there. And then for me, it's basically that once I start doing it, I feel better. Like, once I'm able to do 15 push-ups, it's like, damn, it feels good to be strong. and that dopamine hit will drive the rest of it. So just keep going, but it has to start with something small, in most cases, or just, have a massive thing in your life kick you in the face, or just wait for, it will, if you don't exercise for long enough, your heart will eventually do something angry, or right, like there will be a life occurrence that kicks you in the ass, and a doctor will say to you, you need to start exercising now or you're going to die in a year, and that'll be your kick in the ass. You can wait for that. I probably would have. I'm glad that I didn't, though. So don't. Curtis Hayes says, not Italian, Scottish way back prior to the Mayflower. Nice. Well, I don't know. Italians are notorious for using their hands. Matthew Vegas says, I do push-ups at 5:30 every day in solidarity with you. There we go, friends. Do it. Dre the Drone Guy mentioning 75 Hard program changed my life. It's free. Check it out. There are all kinds of amazing workout routines, many of which are free. It doesn't work for me, though. I hate it. I hate exercise. So for me, it has to be this like little tiny incremental thing. And I have to find stuff that I don't hate. And for me, that's yoga. Jumping around in front of the TV, I would last 1 week doing that. I just don't like it, and that's okay. I'm allowed to not like it, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and beat myself to death for not liking exercise. It's just the way that I am, and that's okay. I will find something that I enjoy. I don't enjoy jogging or running, so I longboard. Walks are just easy. Walks are good for your mental health shit as well. So you're doing two things at once, because there's a meditative part to walking. So yeah, do something. That's it. Do something. every single day. That is the key right there, in my opinion. All right, I'm finally caught up on chat. Great questions. Thank you all. Let's dive into, what are we doing? Oh, yeah, Throttle Expo. So let me find a rig that doesn't overheat when plugged in to Betaflight. So that means no ELRS. What do I have that's not on? So anything Crossfire. Yeah. Anything that's on Crossfire will work. Because we're going to need to be plugged in to Betaflight for a while here. That also means that I need to... Do I have anything on FR Sky? I do. Even better. This way I don't have to get the Crossfire module app. I've got the 250 is on Crossfire, isn't it? Oh wait, no, I've just got that. I can just I can just plug in that Acon AIO. Is it still wired up here? It is. That's kind of annoying. All right, that won't work. Fuck it, I'll just get the Crossfire module out. Where even is it? I haven't flown a Crossfire rig in so long. Hey, there it is. All right, we need this, and we need this antenna. Right. Cool. So, careful with ELRS rigs. They get really hot. Absurdly hot. So, Throttle Expo. It's magic. I'm telling you, it's magic. If you don't believe me, you're wrong. Cole Power says, look forward to when I can Amazon Prime a new heart. We'll definitely remember to use your affiliate link. Okay, so we don't need battery power. It's going to get everything it needs from USB 5 volt. And, all right. Do need to power this transmitter up, though.
Welcome to OpenTV.
There we go. So that should connect. There it is. All right. What is Throttle Expo doing? Expo, in general, takes a linear situation and it puts a curve in it. The reason it puts a curve in it, and the reason that that can sometimes benefit you quite a bit, is that if you ever want to prove this to, we're gonna get. Are we getting hum? This is a different mic. Maybe this mic won't hum from Crossfire. Somebody please let me know in the chat if there's a bunch of hum ever since I turned this on. If you ever fly a battery and you point a camera at your transmitter, you will not go like this the entire battery. You will not spend no hum yet? Awesome. You will not spend the entire battery using the entire stick throw of all the axes all the time. What you'll notice is you fly around using a lot of throttle movement, but the other stuff will stay pretty quiet, and then you'll do like one of those, and then you'll do like one of those, and you'll do one of those. And so one of the theories behind Expo is that you're going to use the curve so that you can use more of the throttle, more of the stick travel more often. So with everything linear, and we're talking rates and throttle, with everything linear, you're going to be like doing everything in the middle. Everything is going to happen in the middle. Throttle's going to be moving around quite a bit, but you're going to notice that you use barely any of the stick travel. Why would you do that to yourself? You have all this throw on the sticks. Use it. Set your rates up so that you're using as much of the throttle throw as possible within reason. Like you don't want to be going like all the way out, but you want to use more than just the center. You want to be using like the middle of the stick travel, and the middle of the stick travel is mainly where the Expo hits. And here's the visualization for that. And you can do this yourself. I'm not doing anything special here. You come in here to the rates tab. And, well, here, I'll show you on the rates. I run a lot of Expo on my rates. The reason that I run a lot of Expo on my rates is it allows me to use, all right, so we're going to do right roll, all right? So the little red guy is going to move over. The left and right is just the throttle travel. I'm going to go all the way into the plastic. I'm going to go in the middle of the throttle travel, and I'm going to go into the center of the throttle travel, right? So left and right is just where your actual throttle stick is. The up and down is how quickly the rig is going to spin. So with this amount of throttle expo, I can move this roll stick all the way over to like 75 or 80% of the way. And if you look, all the way up at the top there is 700 degrees per second, but where I'm at right now is probably only like 250 degrees per second. But I'm pushing the throttle stick over, I'm pushing the roll stick over by 80%. So and that's because this is where I do all my flying in here. If you fly around rotating at like 500, 600, 700 degrees per second all the time, the poor people watching your footage are going to get nosebleeds and die. It's just not realistic. It's just chaos. It's kind of what Spang is, but, you know, Steim is a mess. Spang is a mess. It's hard to watch, right? It's hard for anyone other than us to watch. So that's what Expo is doing. Expo is allowing you to use more throw on your sticks and get less quad movement out of it so that I can be incredibly precise. Like, look at the degrees. Oh, I didn't even realize it tells us the degrees per second. So, like, look at this, right? Hold on. This will be cool. I've never actually looked at the real numbers. So, maximum is 99. I'm going to put my throttle stick at 50%. I'm exactly at 50%. But look at my degrees per second. I'm at 50%, but it's only at like 70 degrees per second. All the way maxed out at 100%, it's 700 degrees per second. That's because when I fly around, I only really usually use about 80 or 90 or 100 degrees per second, because going beyond that rotational rate is just chaos. It's too much. It's out of control. Nobody can like tell what you're doing. It's just absolute like nutcaseville. I'm a more cinematic pilot though. So like most of you would not want it to be this extreme. And most people that fly my rates are like, yo, what the hell? But you do want some amount of expo. Like to run 0 expo up here, it's really hard to fly. And you're going to spend all of your time with the throttle sticks in the center of the travel, and it's going to make flying more difficult. Literally, makes it more difficult. So that is the rate-based expo, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about throttle curve expo. Add more expo. Do yourself a favor. Take your rates expo and double it and fly around, and you'll really understand what expo does. It's magic. Expo is magic. Here's our throttle. This is a 3-inch freestyle rig that I fly really fast and I fly really slow. So I have a very low amount of throttle expo here. Just for the sake of you being able to see what the throttle expo does, I'm going to add in way more throttle expo than you would ever want. So our midpoint is 30%. So on my transmitter, I'm going to go to 30% throttle. So that's 50% there. So that means this is 25%. I'm going to go up a little bit. So that right there is 30% throttle. We've got the midpoint set at 0.3. Oh, it tells me right here. Awesome. So if I go to 30% throttle, this is dead center on the flattened out part, right? And that is exactly our midpoint. Now watch this. So, and you can see I am at 30%. Let me just double check this. Wait, hold on. 78, 79. Yeah, okay. So the first number is where your stick is. The second number is the amount of throttle that you're going to get. And the throttle curve is what changes that. If we make this linear, it lines up, all the way down, because it's linear. Where the stick is the amount of throttle that you're going to get. But that's a little bit more difficult to fly like that. With Throttle Expo, we can put 30% onto the stick and get 30%. But here's the magic. I can now move my throttle stick to 35%. Fuck it, let's go to 40%. And look at the change. We only are going to get 3% more throttle. That is the throttle curve. I can now move this stick up and down a significant amount and only change the amount of actual output by 1%. And that, my friends, is how you stop bouncing around. When your elevation is bouncing around, it's because you're going from 30% throttle to 35, down to 25, up to 30, down to 25, up to 35. If you want to stop bouncing around, you have to be able to change the actual motor output by 1 or 2% at a time. And this is how you do it. You do it with this Throttle Expo. Now, let me show you what happens when you get your midpoint wrong. So let's set the midpoint at 0.60. So now if I go up to 60% throttle, I have that same experience where I can move from 60% throttle up to 70% throttle, and the actual output only changes from 63% thrust to 60% thrust to 63% thrust. But watch this. When I come down here to 30, if my actual cruising throttle is 30%, but I have the mid set at 60, watch this. So I'm going to put my stick at 30%, and now I'm going to, and we're getting 40%. Don't worry about this yet. Just watch the change. If I move my throttle stick from 30% to 40%, watch this number blow up. It goes from 46 to 51. That is a much bigger jump in actual output for a 10% jump in your actual throttle stick. And that is that is what you don't want. That is why most people that have tried to use Throttle Expo hate it, because they don't figure out how to get the midpoint set properly. And when the midpoint is not set right, it makes the situation worse. You move the throttle 10% and you get a 12 or 14 or 15% jump in actual throttle out point. Grey Hat says, how do we find midpoint? We're going to get there. Grey Hat also says, Mr. Steele catching strays in flying style. I don't know. It's... I'm not going to go there. So that is what a good and bad throttle midpoint look like. And that is what happens with the actual output of the motors that causes it to not work properly. So let's bring it back down. Is everybody still with me? Please, if I've lost you right now, please say I'm lost in the chat. Hurry up, though, because I want to keep rolling here. Now, how much Throttle Expo do we want? That's on you. Here are my recommendations. If you've got a rig that you go fast, you go slow. If you've got a rig that you fly very dynamically, you probably don't want more than 0.2. Maybe you do. That's on you. For me, personally, I do not want more than 0.2 because of exactly what we were just looking at. I do not want a big drastic throttle curve, right? So here's how I can show you this. So let's go back up. Let's go all the way to 0.99. All right. At 0.99, I put my throttle to 30%. I get 30%. I move my throttle stick from 30% to 40%. I only get 1 more percent of motor output. And the quad barely changes altitude. This is way too much though, but with a 10% jump in throttle throw, you get 1 to 2% more actual throttle. At 0.2 Throttle Expo, at 30%, I'm at 30, of course. At 40%, I'm at 38. A much bigger jump in throttle throw. But in this scenario, this is a rig that sometimes I fly around at 25% throttle, and come on, get there. Sometimes I fly it at 25% throttle, and it gives me 26% motor output. Sometimes I fly this damn thing at 50% throttle, and it's going to give me 47%. So it's not making such a drastic change, and that's what you want, because again, as we just saw, if you're at the wrong part of the curve, it makes the situation worse. So with a rig that you fly really fast, really slow, your cruising throttle percentage is going to be all over the damn place. So you don't want this massive change of output. You want it to be a more subtle change. But what you'll probably find is that even on a rig that you fly fast and slow, personally, you will probably have a rough amount of speed that you cruise at, and the 0.2% Throttle Expo will probably work well for you as long as you can get the midpoint set properly. We're gonna again hit on that in another second. So the amount of okay, so freestyle rigs, very dynamic rigs, I do not like more than 0.2 Throttle Expo. Do your own exploration on that, but to get you started, 0.2 is a spot. On Cinewhoops, I run this at 0.4. Again, it's with a Cinewhoop, elevation control is incredibly important. It looks super unprofessional when your elevation bounces all over the place. So running more Throttle Expo smooths that out. And typically with a Cinewhoop, you're flying roughly the same speed. You don't fly Cinewhoops at 80 miles an hour. You fly them at like 20 almost all the time. If you want to fly a Cinewhoop faster, you've got to bury the fucking camera in the ground, and then you don't get the shot. It looks terrible. So with Cinewhoops, you're almost always just kind of cruising slowly around. It's the tool for the job. Cinewhoops are the tool to fly slowly and safely, right? So you're usually going to be roughly at the same throttle amount, and so you can run a higher amount of Throttle Expo and take advantage of that. On the tiny whoops, sometimes I have to run these tiny whoops, especially the ones with the mega KV motors, all the way up at 0.5 Throttle Expo. And in that scenario, look at this. Ready? At 30% throttle, I get 30, of course, because that's our midpoint. If I bump all the way up to 40% on the stick, I only get an extra 6%. That's a lot. You can feel this. 0.50 of Throttle Expo is very obvious. It'll take a tiny whoop that is almost... I was literally on a Fiverr call today with somebody who their tiny whoop was unflyable inside the house with no Throttle Expo. On the Fiverr call, I had him add 0.4 Expo, and I guessed at a 0.35 midpoint. And all of a sudden, he's doing power loops and like inside of his... we were in the sim, but all of a sudden, he's like able to do things and actually fly inside of the apartment map that we were on in the sim. It is magic. 0.4, 0.5, even 0.3 Throttle Expo. It is very obvious. I know it doesn't look that obvious from these numbers here, but trust me, it is very, very, very obvious. How do you find your midpoint? The best way to find it, in my opinion, is to actually fly for real. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to take the rig that is most sensitive and that is hardest to fly, which is the 36,000 kV 0702 Cinewhoop, Tiny Whoop rather. You can do all this in Velocidrone. Velocidrone has the full rates menu. You can go in there. There's Throttle Expo. You can screw around with it. It's a great way to learn it. Doing it for real, you're not going to hurt the rigs, so you might as well do it for real. But if you just like quickly want to fart around with it, Velocidrone will let you do it, and that is super helpful. In fairness, let me get this. Everybody still with me? Shit. There's the module I need. There we go. All right. How do you set your midpoint? Setting the midpoint is the most important part of this whole thing. If you get the midpoint wrong, it will be worse. Everything will be worse. Literally everything. Every throttle position will be worse if you get the midpoint set wrong. Where the hell are my goggles? They're there. So yeah, if you're not gonna take a little bit of time to get your midpoint set right, don't do this. Don't add any Throttle Expo if you're not gonna custom set the midpoint, or if you think you're gonna just take my settings and drop them in. I can almost guarantee you it's gonna make the situation worse. Grey Hat says, what's the best sim for tiny whoop practice besides in real life? I do not know. My guess would be Velocidrone because it's just better for everything. But yeah, I don't. I've only ever used Velocidrone and Liftoff, so there could be another sim that's even better for tiny whoops. Although I don't think many sims have tiny whoops in them, so I think your selection is going to be pretty limited. Let's turn off the HD and turn on the analog. All right, so I got to show you something else in Betaflight. Hold on. I'll show you on this rig because we're going to plug it in. First thing you need to do is put your throttle amount in your OSD. Technically, you don't have to do this. You could run a stick cam and just look at where your throttle your throttle usually is, but that is nowhere near accurate enough. So don't do that. Plug your quad in, go into the OSD, scroll down here, and turn on throttle position, and put this somewhere in your OSD so that you can get the actual number. 40%, 41%, 42%. You can get the exact number. Pointing a camera at your sticks is going to get you like, hey, it looks like I might be at around 30% throttle. Like you're not going to get a good enough, an accurate enough number from that. And you've all got OSD, so just do it. Put your throttle position in your OSD. I put it over on the right here. Doesn't matter where you put it. But if you want to copy me, put it right above your amperage output. The reason that that's important is that you need to see where your throttle is most of the time. What we're doing, the midpoint needs to go wherever you spend the most amount of time on the throttle. You can do it live when you're flying. Even better is to DVR a couple of batteries and then just stare at it in the DVR. Just stare at that number. And you're going to be able to average it out. In your brain, you're going to be able to average it out. And I'll show you that right now. So here's what it looks like. 20... Oh, nope. There we go. 27, 25, 26, 28, 29, 27, 27. And I'm literally just staring at that number and flying out of the corner, out of my peripheral vision. 29, 28, 26, 25, 26. It's hard to fly when you're staring at the throttle number. 28, 29, 26, 27. When you blast the throttle, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. When you go zero throttle, that doesn't matter. What you're looking is for your cruising throttle percent. 28, still at 28, 29, 28, 27. Here's the thing. You guys saw that my throttle percentage is set. Well, here, I'll show you. We'll go into the OSD. We'll go into profile. And this one screen is super... Oh, there we go. All right, hold on. So, wait, get me out of here. So, into the OSD, we're going to go into profile. We're going to go down to rate. And we're going to scroll all the way down. There's throttle mid. You'll notice my throttle mid is at 38. But just now, I was flying around at 28, 29, 27. That's because, look how slow I'm flying. Have you guys ever seen me fly this slow before? No. I'm just doing this for an illustration. If this is as slow as you fly, awesome. But what I don't want you to do is what I'm doing right now. Don't go and stare at the throttle number and very carefully fly around the room. Unless that's how you normally fly. If you normally fly staring at the throttle number, slowly flying around the room, well then you're fine, but you probably don't. What you want to do, and this is why DVRing the battery works much better, is because you need to fly normal. You need to fly around the room like you normally do. That's super important. So wherever, Gray Hat, that's right. You're right. If you put it in the middle of the OSD, it would definitely help. But you don't want to be looking at it. You want to just kind of glance over at it. So what you want to do is just fly. Just fly. And if you're going to do it, really, DVR is... Shit. DVR is the way to go. This is an unrecoverable spot. I don't even know why I'm trying. DVR is definitely the way to go, but you can probably... Yes! Oh god, that almost hit me. You can probably do it on the fly. Because, like, when you're flying around the room, there are going to be moments where you're just kind of tracking across the room, and I can, like, look down and see, like, 40. I saw 42. I saw 38 just now. I saw 31, but I was kind of descending. You can still kind of get a feel for it eventually. Your first time doing this, do yourself a favor, DVR the fucking flight, and then just stare at it. And you're going to see, like, hopefully you guys are just staring at it right now. You're going to see I'm all over the place. I'm pretty active on the throttle. That doesn't really matter. What matters is, like, you get a rough idea of what a center point is going to be. And then there's going to be some experimentation that comes after this. But for right now, you're just trying to get, like, a rough estimate of around where you want to be. And then you can dial it in by feel after this. But for right now, you have no idea what your normal midpoint is. So DVR a battery or two and just stare at that number and try to come up with the average. You're looking for roughly what the average number is. So if you fly around and you're constantly moving your throttle up and down between 20 and 40, your average is 30. And 30 is where you want to set your actual midpoint at, right? So now you've got a starting point. You've got a rough average number that you can put your midpoint at. And it's going to be pretty damn close. Eat Your Veg says you can use stick overlay in Velocity, and that's a cool idea. Unfortunately, the stick overlay that we get in Betaflight is too delayed, and it won't really help you out. So don't try to use that. It'll just make the situation worse. So now you've got a rough idea of where you want your midpoint to be. The next step, and I'm going to do it in the OSD, is... So you want to do that before you add any Throttle Expo. You want to do that with a linear throttle amount. So that's the very first thing. First thing is to turn on the throttle in the OSD. But the very first thing you do is get an idea of what your normal cruising throttle percentage is in whatever the space that you fly this tiny whoop in is. If you fly this thing at home in your little apartment, and then you fly it after work in the warehouse, you got to do this in both spots. And that's tough. Ideally, what you want to do is build a whoop for the house and build a whoop for the warehouse. But what you could, if you don't want to do that, you can just have two rate profiles. The Throttle Expo is tied to the rate profile number. So you have your rate profile 1 for home, and the only thing that changes is the Throttle Expo. And then you have your rate profile for the warehouse, and the only thing that changes is the Throttle Expo. Don't change your rates. It's better to have your muscle memory based on individual rates, on the same rates across all your rigs. So that's the first thing you do. Once you have that number, you're gonna go. Nah, this Stream Deck is failing. Jesus Christ, Elgato, come on now. So that's the first thing that you do. You can certainly do this in Betaflight, or you can just do it in your OSD. Go into the rates, scroll all the way down. Here's throttle mid for your bottom one. You're going to set that. So now we've set our throttle mid to 38. Great. If you go down again, this is just me going down. There's a second page of stuff. The very next option is Throttle Expo. What I want you to do is turn your Throttle Expo all the fucking way up. Max it out at 100 and fly the rig. It's going to feel weird. It's not going to be right. But what I want you to do is get the experience of an infinite amount of Throttle Expo. Look how much I'm moving the throttle amount, and the quad is barely changing altitude. Look at that. From like 70% down to like 20. Look at that. Look at how much I was just moving it up and down, and it's tracing a perfectly level path across the room, right? This is too much Throttle Expo. But what's cool about doing this is this will make whether or not you've got your midpoint set painfully obvious. So what you do here is you fly around the room normally, and you're going to just feel what the Throttle Expo does. And it's a really good little exercise in linear versus ass loads of Throttle Expo. Now, if you really want to feel the difference, turn it off. Turn the Expo amount all the way down to 0. So let's do that. And now this is just you learning. This is not like necessarily how you want to set these things, but now with no, I mean, and like I can calm down and I can just chill out. But the whole point is for us to have a little bit more leeway. Like right when I fly normally, like I'm moving the throttle up and down to like make corrections and make catches. And when I make those, I'm not always absolutely... You see how much I'm bouncing? Look how much I'm bouncing up and down. Like I'm... Sure, I've gotten used to having the Throttle Expo there, but just controlling your altitude with a linear throttle, especially on these crazy KV motors, is really difficult. And like, look... Doesn't this just look bad? Like... It just looks like I'm always unsure of myself, and I'm always just like up and down and up and down, and like... And I'm not necessarily doing that on purpose. Again, yes, I am used to having Throttle Expo, and I'm used to being able to move the throttle up and down more. But that is the look that we're trying to avoid. Now, just for argument's sake... Oh, these aren't my rates. These are Izzy and Eva's rates. There we go. Those are my rates. Okay. So now I'm back to since the Throttle Expo is tied to rates, I'm now back to my normal midpoint and expo amount. Oops. Oh, fucker. I need to do that. Oh, no, it did save it. Cool. Compare what I was just doing to me crashing unrecoverable. Fuck you. Don't use Throttle Expo. You'll just crash immediately. Yeah. Compare how bouncy that just was to this. I mean, the battery's getting a little soft, but still. See how much better that footage looks? Like, right... Really? Every time I crash it now, it's going to be unrecoverable? Go to hell. I hope you could immediately see the difference there, because I'm not doing it again. We're gonna move on, but there's a massive difference in, especially with these tiny whoops, with Throttle Expo versus no Expo. So. You've found a rough center point for your throttle mid. You've turned the Throttle Expo all the way up, just so that you can feel what it does. You've turned it all the way down, which, again, just makes it blindingly obvious what the Throttle Expo is doing. Now, use those rough numbers. If it's a 5-inch rig, use the Throttle Expo amount of 0.2. If it's a Cinewhoop or a Tiny Whoop, use 0.4 or 0.5. And fly it again. And that's what we're going to do right now. That's kind of what we just did, but that's what we're going to do right now. And there's one last little bit of dialing in that you need to do, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult, but this is where the actual magic of a properly set amount of Throttle Expo happens. So I am now at my normal amount of Throttle Expo with a freshly charged battery on 36,000 kV motors. So now you're going to fly a bunch of batteries. And it's probably going to feel a lot better. But what you want to do is try to fly around slower than you normally do. And what you want to feel is that when you fly around slower, you want to see this elevation bounce. Because when you fly slower than you normally do, you want to be on the bad part of the curve. You want the good part of the curve to be... See how much I'm bouncing? I don't usually fly this slow. And then you want to do... Where am I? Oh, I'm over there. And then you want to do the opposite. And you want to fly faster, which is really hard to do in this room with all these gates. Really? Every crash? No, we're good. Then you want to fly faster. Oh my god. You want to fly faster than you normally do. And you want it to be kind of bouncy. And then you want to fly normal. And the reason you want to do this is if you go and you fly slower and the throttle feels really good, then you've got your midpoint set too low. If you fly around really fast and the midpoint feels really good, you've got the midpoint set too high. You want to then settle down into your normal speed, and you want that to feel the best. You want the regular amount of speed that you carry to feel better than when you're flying too slow or when you're flying too fast. Because the numbers... DVRing your flight and then having those numbers it's really good and it gets you really, really, really close. But flying for real is a little bit different. And whoops. And sorry guys. I've never totally been able to understand why. I think it's just that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is just it's just the case. It really doesn't matter why. It's just how it is. You want to do a little bit of manual adjustment of your throttle midpoint in order to get it perfect. And if you're running a tiny whoop with like 0.4 or 0.5 amount of Throttle Expo, you will feel the Throttle Expo, and you will feel when you have it set too low and when you have it set too high. And the last thing that you can kind of do to dial that in, might as well show you. I'm ignoring the chat for the moment just so that I get all the way through this explanation, and then I'll dive back into the chat. Here's how here's the other way to dial it. The next step in dialing it in perfectly is, God damn it, really? Come on. Get it together, Stream Deck. Get it together. You're just going to change it. You're going to go into the OSD. You're going to go into Profile. You're going to go into Rates. And you're going to take this midpoint of 38. And you're going to move it up and down by 5 points. So from 38 to 43. Yaw to the right. Save and exit. Fly it around. See if it feels better or worse. Can you see that it's worse? I can certainly feel that it's worse, and I think I can also see that it's worse. Hopefully you guys can see that as well. This feels drastically worse. Even though it's only a 5% change, this feels significantly worse. I can still fly, but do you see the elevation all over the goddamn place? I'm constantly bouncing up and down in altitude. That's it set wrong. So now I know that going up by 5 points makes it worse. Now all I got to do is go back in here and go back down by 5, but go down another 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where we were, but go the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go down to 33. Fuck it, 32. And now fly it at 32. And let's see. See how it's worse? See the elevation bouncing up and down? Ooh, I went back through it. That was kind of cool. See that? See how I didn't get through that gap? when have you ever seen me miss the cymbal gap? I've missed it before, but usually I don't. You're gonna adjust pretty quickly to a bad throttle midpoint. Keep that in mind. I adjust very quickly. You guys probably won't adjust quite as fast. Maybe you will. But you will adjust to this pretty quickly, which is why you want to change it pretty frequently. Change it a couple times per battery. Change it up, change it down. Change it up, change it down. Like, keep bouncing it around. It will become... Why did it go back to rate profile 2? What the hell? You're gonna... Oh, God. Yeah, it's all... Okay, well, this is fine. We're gonna go back up to 38. And the amount is 40. Okay, that's fine. And so here you go. Here's with it back where I want it. See the see how that elevation bounce is gone? Still hear me bouncing the throttle up and down, right? You still see me bouncing the throttle up and down on the throttle OSD element, but that elevation bounce is gone. That is a properly set throttle midpoint. If you're really good, you'll be able to tell if the midpoint is off by 2 or 3. If I can tell when my throttle midpoint is at 38 versus 36 versus 40. A part of that is because I run so much Throttle Expo. On your 5-inch freestyle rigs, or if you just don't want to run a lot of Throttle Expo, it's much more subtle. We saw that, right? The linear curve is here. When you add 0.2, it puts a little bit of a bend in it, but it's not drastic. At 0.5, there's a big fucking bend there. So the more Throttle Expo you use, the more sensitive the midpoint is going to be, and the more like diligent you're going to have to be at getting your midpoint set properly. And I think that's about all that I can give you on Throttle Expo. That is the full thing. Getting it perfect takes time. Getting it roughed in to where it'll start to help you is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. It's those first chunk of steps. This last little bit where you're actually flying it around and you're trying to see if it makes a difference is difficult. What I find does help is being active on the throttle. The whole point of this is so that you can be active on the throttle and you can move the throttle and not have the damn thing jump up. So when you're trying to set it, move the throttle around. Don't just do this thing. I've seen pilots that just like go to like 40% throttle and it'll just stay there and they'll just fly around using pitch and roll and yaw. And I think that is an adaptation of having a rig without Throttle Expo. They don't want their elevation to bounce up and down, so they just don't move it. They just set their throttle at a point and they just leave it there. No, keep the throttle moving, man. Like you can do a lot of flying with just changing the throttle, because we're always like pitched forward, pitched sideways, and like when you're pitched sideways, if you go full throttle, you can move laterally a lot. If you give it a little bit of throttle, you can move just a little bit laterally. You can fly, you can move your sticks into a certain position and fly for like 5 seconds, only varying the throttle. And if you have a nice Throttle Expo and midpoint set, you've got even more subtlety there. So when you're throwing yourself towards a gap and you don't want to make a correction because you want to look like a good pilot, you can use the throttle really subtly to get yourself into that gap so that you don't have to add roll or do any other more obvious change to the attitude of the camera, right? That ends up looking like a correction and looking like you kind of screwed up. Into the chat we go. Be honest. How many people did I lose? If I lost you towards the end there, be honest and say that you're lost, and we'll what you want to do is just watch this all over again, and the second time through you won't be lost. Actually, no. What you want to do is start flying, and then it'll start to sink in, and then watch this again, and you won't be lost. In the chat, Kevin the Alien's been running his Throttle Expo at 0.5 lately. Don't be afraid of Throttle Expo. Run a bunch, especially if it's your first time. If it's your first time messing around with Throttle Expo, run a bunch because you want to be able to feel it. The worst possible thing when you're learning beta flight and you're learning all this shit in there is for you to not feel a difference, but the placebo and your brain and your ego and whatever it is says, oh yeah, I can feel a difference. Because then you've made a change that you don't actually feel a difference to. You think you feel a difference, and 50-50 at that point. Is it better or is it worse? You've got a 50-50 chance of making the situation worse or the situation better, and that's just stupid. Just don't do that. You got to be really honest with yourself, and you got to really fight the placebo and the confirmation bias when tuning this stuff. If the change that you just made is not absolutely evident, you need to make a bigger change. And Throttle Expo is a beautiful example of that. PID tuning is another great example. Rate tuning is another great example. There's situations where this happens a lot. So yeah, don't be afraid to whack the Throttle Expo up to 0.5 and fly a whole bunch of batteries. Down the road, understand that you might want to back it off. But that, to me, that is a decision based around the quad. A little 65mm tiny whoop, you're only ever going to fly slowly. A 5-inch freestyle rig, it depends on where you fly. If you always fly the same spot, maybe this is not you. But these are very dynamic rigs that can be flown very fast and very slow. And so you probably won't want a ton of Throttle Expo on this. So run a shitload of it, try it out. And then if you notice that like sometimes you go real fast, sometimes you go real slow, bring it down. But don't be afraid of adding a bunch of Throttle Expo. You're not going to hurt anything. You're only going to learn. Brad Mondin says, I have no friends. I'm still with you. You got plenty of friends, brother. They're all in the chat. They're on my Discord. And there's one on YouTube that's gangly as hell. Grey Hat says, oh, no, we got that. Kevin Sumner, no, we got that. Oh yeah, right. Tiny Whoop Go. Right. Where there's a whole Tiny Whoop simulator. That's probably the best one. Allfax is calling out Tiny Whoop Go as well. For the record, the Tiny Whoops in Velocidrone feel really good. Grey Hat says maybe putting it in. We got that. A 3 or 5 second running average throttle value would be amazing as an OSD element. Maybe, but I think that it would be terribly skewed either in the positive or in the negative. I think that we use 0% throttle. Well, no, the skew would be because 100% throttle is way higher than the 30 or 35% throttle that we normally cruise at, and 0% is low. So I think a running average throttle value, or just a since the last time you discharged throttle running average, I think it would always skew too high, to be honest. Once you start doing this and you adjust it really quick in the OSD on the ground 3-4 times the battery, you'll feel it. You guys will feel it for sure. It's very, very obvious. And when you get it right, when you get the expo amount and specifically the midpoint right, it is all of a sudden your altitude control is just nailed. Like when you want to fly high and close to the ceiling, you fly high and close to the ceiling. When you want to scrape the ground, you fucking scrape the ground. And this bouncing, it just goes away. Not completely, because that takes millions of hours of flying, but it is so obvious when you get the expo amount and specifically the midpoint set properly. It just... Your flight footage will look so much better. You'll watch your DVR and be like, what the hell? Like, it looks like I just got 6 months of flying in, and you look more purposeful, you look more locked. It looks more like a Mavic than an FPV rig, because you're not doing this. You're doing this, and it's purposeful. The elevation changes that you make become purposeful rather than based on, like, I was in a turn and I added too much throttle, or any number of weird scenarios. CMYK's in the house. Grey Hat says, I like to put expo on a slider limited between 10 and 40% to play with it while flying and find roughly the right amount. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can do that in adjustments, but that would be very cool. Did I Stevie Wonder a battery? Sorry, guys. Matt Richardson says, still here, just decided to charge a bunch of Whoop battery packs and rip. Veritas Uza says, did you get an answer from Happy Me concerning the plug connectors and the AIO? Happy Me? Who's Happy Me? Plug connectors and the AIO. HappyModel. No, because I forgot to message them. Grey Hat's done it, but it's on the radio side. Okay, so it's OpenTX stuff. That's annoying. No, I forgot. But a whole bunch of the new Mobula 6s are showing up, and they're all direct soldered. So and putting the plugs in on those sides, it's not going to work. I can also tell now that I've looked at a few more of them, they really spaced the motor pads out, and I can just tell that they're spaced out too far. So there's the new HappyModel AIO is going to be direct solder only. We're not going to be able to put connectors on it. I can just tell you that. I don't even have to ask them. It's 12:30. That's too late. Time to go to bed, friends. I have a feeling that an awful lot of people are going to get an awful lot out of this live stream. I'm sorry it took me so long to do this. I have talked about Throttle Expo a lot. It's on the 10 tips. We really dove into it. But yeah, spending an hour on it, I didn't realize that it really needs an hour. It's there's a lot to it, and it's really easy to get lost in how to tune it. So yeah, get a timestamp for when I started to really dive into this, and send it to your friends and say, yo, this completely changed the game for me. Especially if they've got high KV tiny whoops. It is so important on these. These are so hard to fly in the house. Tiny whoops in general are hard to fly in the house. Low weight, high power ones are almost impossible to fly in the house. Grey Hat with the last comment on the live stream, he says, the Throttle Expo on OpenEdge TX is really easy. One special function, I can send you the info. Put it on the Discord. Put it in the Tiny Whoop Toothpick group on Discord so that everybody can benefit from it. Thanks for hanging, friends. CiottiFPV.com to support me. If you like this kind of content, I'll keep doing it for as long as I can afford to. And you guys are who helped me with that. So thank you. It's very cool of you. I'm going to fly 2 more batteries because 6 a day, yo. Did I do all the things that I put in the title of the stream? Midpoint Monday, dialing and Throttle Expo, super excited, Q&A. I did. Tell your friends, yo. Let's all use Throttle Expo because it's magic and it makes tiny whoops way more fun to fly inside. Let me fly a proper battery with proper Throttle Expo. And I'm going to fly a brand new battery so I have all the power in the world. And then we're going to shut this shit down. I'm even going to put music on. I'm going to play you out on this. Get in there. There we go. What do we got here? Hey, easy. I'm going to have to hit a couple things. Hold on. So we're going to turn the mic off. I don't want to turn the mic off. I can probably mix them. I won't be able to mix them. I'm just going to let it play through this. Realistically, this is the best bet. Thanks for hanging, friends. One last battery, and then I'm going to go right into the end screen. I'll see you... today's Wednesday. I'll see you Friday. Whoa! Oh, God! Hold on. Now we're good. Oh, I missed that gate. Oh, come on. Jesus. Ah! Trying to get a big power loop in there with the music. Oh, what is happening? Not a good night for flying for me. There it is. Ah! Ah, come on. Come on. Oh my god. Yeah, not my night, man. Not my night. Ah. Ah, that would have been cool. Stop it. Oh my god. Brutal. Ah! Ah! Wow, I just full throttled right into the ground. Not my night. Nope. Yikes, man. Some days you got it. Some days you should quit your job and go back into an office. Hey! Ah! I tried to get back in there. Later, people. Love you. Bye.